joined with Ryan Tyndell, songwriter in the Nashville world, in the country music world. Man, I was looking, and I put a playlist together of like all the great songs you've written. Man, you've written some of my all-time favorites, so I'm really excited about this one. I appreciate you taking some time today.
Sure, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Man, so there's just so much that you have done, and I just want to know, because it was kind of funny how certain things happen. I was going on a walk yesterday, and it's just, I found complete clarity. And that's actually where most of my interview questions came. It was just thinking about the conversation tomorrow, and that's where it came to me. Where do you find clarity when you're trying to write songs?
I think the key to it is you never stop. You never turn it off. You just try to find a way to always be available to receive something when it drops out of the sky, because it's not always when you sit down to write. Sometimes it doesn't happen. But for me personally, I'm an early bird. I've always been an early bird. My circadian rhythm gets me up at usually 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning without having to set an alarm. And part of that is I have 2 young kids and I got to get up and help them too. But it kind of just happened naturally to where I get up and I have quiet time before the world is awake, and I usually either go for a walk or get a workout in, put my headphones on, do some reading. But that's usually my time. It's either earlier in the morning or right as I start getting tired and going to bed, and sometimes I'll I'm a baseball guy, so at night I'll put on a baseball game, and sometimes I'll just turn off the audio and I'll just kind of sit there and I'll either, listen to music or a podcast or something and kind of just have baseball in the background. And every now and then something will come to me, and I have a gut string that I keep right by the couch there where I can grab it, anytime I need it. But that's kind of my process. It's the process never stops. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good way to live it. And it's music is in the world. It's about the world. It's all around us. Can you, as a songwriter, you might kind of mention how if something pops up in your mind, you've got a guitar within arm's length to get it. Can you ever turn that off in terms of like, oh, this is a song, or this could kind of be a song, or are there kind of like lyrics always floating around in your heads, ideas?
Yeah, it's very difficult to turn off once you get sort of in the headspace. Now, there are times throughout the year where I just feel burnt out and my antennas go down, and it's just, that's part of the process. But for the most part, I like to try to do the best I can to keep them up, and that's the other part. One of the difficult parts about doing this job is, I have a whole life outside of the music business, and is making time available to where I can try to put it aside and, focus on my kids, my wife, and my friends, or whatever else needs my attention at the moment. But that is one of the struggles, is because it's always on. It's really difficult to turn it off. But and the other part of that is, once you feel like you hit a hot streak, you're sort of in the back of your mind wondering when it's going to go away. So you try to get it out while you can. So that's just part of my process.
What circumstances, you kind of mentioned how you need to make time for yourself, and there are certain times of the day where you think a little bit clearer. Like, what circumstances, I guess we can kind of go over some of the songs that we'll talk about in a little bit, but I love the song We Were, cool. 5 by Dierks Bentley, Old Hat, Springsteen, obviously. What circumstances and maybe situations need to be right to write a song like that? Is it the setting? Is it the people you're with? Like, what kind of setting do you need to just have a great song written?
Well, no two are the same. I mean, they're all a little different circumstances, but I would say the biggest thing is the people that you surround yourself with. And I'm just one of those guys that I don't write with a whole lot of people. I keep a very small circle Jeff Hyde is one of my go-tos. He and I have been writing songs for 20 years. So, I mean, we're kind of to the point to where we can finish each other's sentences, and we just sort of, we think similar. And I trust him. Trust is a big thing. I trust him, and he trusts me. And Jeremy Spillman is another one. Jeff and Jeremy are, they're like my brothers. It goes much deeper than, just songwriting. I mean, Jeff lives down the street from me, and, I've known Jeremy just about as long as I've known Jeff. So that's a big part of it. And they kind of both work the same way that I do, where very rarely do you show up with nothing and then a song gets written. We all kind of, we are all kind of constantly working, and we'll kind of go through our ideas and, see if they like something. And, as it turns out, sometimes maybe my well is a little dry that day, and, somebody else picks up the slack. I mean, that's just kind of how we operate. Jeff and I, we call ourselves the buzzards. That's the kind of our little nickname for ourselves, is because, if you ever look up in the sky and you see a buzzard, if a buzzard is flying up high in the sky, he's making those huge rounds because he found something, and he slowly circles around. And he does that so his other buzzard friends that maybe hadn't found anything, they can come over and swirl down with him. And maybe the next time the buzzard that found at that time doesn't have anything, and he'll see his buddy Ryan over there circling around. So that's why we call ourselves the buzzards.
you ought to like write a song called The Buzzards,
yeah,
about
so.
that whole thing.
Maybe so.
Yes.
Maybe so.
Well, you mentioned Jeff Hyde, and I'm seeing a lot of these songs on this list you co-wrote with Jeff Hyde and
Sure.
some others. And you mentioned how talented he is and how well you guys work together. One song that I just could not get out of my head, especially when it came out, was Old Hat. And I know he actually recorded that himself, and then obviously was recorded by Party. How did Old Hat come about? How did the buzzard circle on that one?
That one in particular was something that popped right out of Jeff's mouth. I mean, it was something that he had found and kind of was setting on for a little bit, and it just so happened that we got together. And I sort of live in two worlds as far as songwriting goes. Obviously, I work in the production and the technical side of things, the engineering side of things, just because that was a skill I sort of developed early on. But fortunately, I was able, before the technology and all that came along, I was able to figure out, or I sat around with some of the old cats and learned how to sit down with a guitar and write a song. I mean, I used to help Curly Putman do his work tapes because he didn't know how to work his computer, so I hung around some of those old school guys and came up that way. But for Old Hat in particular, Jeff had the idea, and we just kind of whittled on. I mean, I bet it was maybe an hour and a half where we kind of knocked the lyric out, and then I started whipping up sort of I came up with the little guitar parts at the beginning, and sort of by the end of the day, we had the bones of what turned into the cut on Jeff's record. And then we called in, some of the other guys that played on it. And then, shortly after it came out, Party heard it and loved it and fell in love with the song, and ended up, being the first track on his record. And honestly, that was a big part of why we wanted to do Hyde's record, is because, sometimes people view things different if they look at a body of work, a list of songs that are on one collective body of work, than as opposed to maybe me just sending that song to John.
Right.
And they looked at it. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but that was sort of the reason we did it, is because, Hyde and I had a pile of songs, and Jeff, he had some songs that he had written with some other people that we really just wanted to put out into the world and get some feelers on. And, I think, we've gotten 2 or 3 cuts off of that record. I know. But it was a passion project, and it was a blast.
Yeah, and there's literally a whole nother conversation that can be
Sure,
made about Jeff Hyde's, Norman Rockwell world, but
sure,
for the sake of time,
sure.
we'll move on. This one song in particular, I still love, and it came to me. It's so funny how songs come to you at certain times in your life that you just absolutely need them, and
Right,
that was the case for We Were,
right.
dropped by Keith Urban, and since it has literally been one of my all-time favorite songs. I still
Thank
play
you.
it almost every day. So,
Right.
where did We Were start?
We were started with Jeff and I kind of getting together, and we knew, I believe at this time, Eric was going in to make, I believe it was the Desperate Man record, or it may
Hmm.
have been the one before. I can't remember exactly which one, but we knew that we were going to have an opportunity to get with Eric, and we, you know, like I said before, we don't like to go in with and not bring anything, so we wanted to go in loaded for bear. So we wrote Jeff and I got together and wrote a piece of that, piece of the verse and a little bit of the chorus. And we decided, we thought we were on to something. So we decided to just stop right there and not get too far ahead of it. Cause I know the way Eric's mind works, I mean, the thing about Eric is he's one of the best songwriters that I've ever written with. And I know a lot of people know that, but, Eric is one of the strongest wordsmiths to ever cross the Davidson County line. He's the kind of writer that even if he wasn't Eric Church, the big superstar that's playing stadiums, he would be a guy that I would want to write with as much as I could. And with that song in particular, we ended up going and writing it with Eric, and it was one of those situations where I guess it ended up not fitting on the record that he was working on. So I was a little disappointed, but sure enough, it wasn't too long after that I played it. I played that song for Laura Wright. I ended up doing a little demo and played it for Laura, and Laura sent it. I guess she sent it to Missy Gallimore, and Missy sent it directly to Keith, and the rest was history.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, and he ended up being on the song anyways, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it was,
Yeah.
it all ended up working out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually the first song. That little riff at the beginning was the first riff I ever learned on the guitar back when quarantine started,
Right.
which is funny. But you kind of mentioned Eric, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about Springsteen. This will kind of be the last song that we'll talk about. Then we'll talk
Sure.
about your work on his upcoming project that's going to be released soon. But Springsteen, man, I mean, if people don't know Eric Church, they still probably know that song. Or if they know only one Eric Church song, it's probably Springsteen.
Right.
So what a powerful song. How did that one come about?
That song, I went out on the road with Eric. I think it was sometime in the fall of 2010, I believe. I jumped on his bus, and we wrote 2 or 3 songs throughout that weekend. And what was funny is Springsteen was actually the last song that we wrote that weekend. And we were all Eric had played a festival, I believe it was St. Petersburg, Florida. And we were just about getting ready to pull out and head back to Nashville. And it was just kind of one of those things that fell out. It wasn't really any preconceived thing. It was one of those things that ended up happening where I think I played Eric a little piece of music, and he said, "Man, what about something like Springsteen?" And next thing you know, Jeff was coming on the bus, and I bet it was an hour and a half later we did a little work tape, and the rest was history. It was just one of those things, and I always thought it was cool that was the last song from the trip. And I think that was honestly maybe the only song from that trip that ended up on Chief. So I sure was glad that it happened.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are. And this will transition us into the new project that he's working on, Heart
Right.
and Soul. I know you're actually, I think, one of the few artists or few songwriters who has written a song that's on all 3, I believe.
Right.
Heart of the Night, which is going to be on Heart. Lone Wolf, which is on the
Right.
Choir exclusive album,
Right.
and then Where I Want to Be, which is on Soul.
Right.
I was talking to Jeremy Spillman last week about this whole process, and he was actually the one who connected me to you. And
Right.
he told me that the process was kind of a crazy one in terms of writing a song the same day. So I want to hear from your perspective. What was that whole? I think you were there for a week. So like, what was that week like in the mountains of North Carolina?
It was, I mean, the only word I can think of is amazing. It's one of the most wonderful, eye-opening experiences that I've had since being here in Nashville and being, a professional songwriter. And one of the brilliant things about that situation is, when you go down there, you're spending a week, and it's basically kind of a 24 hours a day, sleep when you're dead mentality. And that every day Eric's going to come walking through that door, and you better have something, and it's a good, and I guess it can be a little nervous if you take it that way, but I would say it's a good nervous energy. And what happens in that experience, and this is why Eric is brilliant, is when you get down there, you're not having to turn it off. It's just you are there. There's nowhere else to go. So when we're in Nashville, if I have a writing appointment at 10 a.m. and, I'm usually finishing, who knows when it's finishing up, but I'll be heading home by about 5 or 5:30 on most nights to go home. And then I put my dad hat on, and you try to turn it off as best as you can. Well, when you're down there, something happens to where when you're in a situation where you don't have to turn it off, the creative juices kind of just keep flowing, and Eric certainly had his antennas up on this project. I mean, Eric's always the sharpest knife in the drawer. But man, I've never seen him that dialed in to just the creative experience. I mean, he was right. There were certain times to where, there was one time in particular that I was playing guitar in the guitar booth, and then Eric was like right next to me singing. We were cutting a song with the band, and in between takes, Eric would lean over to me and say, "Hey man, what about check out this idea?" And he was literally writing a song as we were recording a song.
Wait, like a different song?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
song. A different song. He was, and I think one of those ended up being Heart of the Night.
Really?
We were recording a whole nother song, and he said, "Man, what about this?" He spit out a couple lyrics, and then next thing you know, Jeremy and I and Eric are, somebody's doing an overdub or a vocal or something, and we're either downstairs, just talking, and all of a sudden we're writing a different song. It was amazing. I've never experienced anything like that, and it was freeing, just to be able to write something and record it that day.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it was a good nervous energy to have.
Yeah.
So,
and that's so funny that's how hard you're literally like writing the song while another one was playing. You said you were there for a week. Did you write more than 3 songs that didn't end up making it onto this record?
I think we ended up, I can't remember the exact number, but I know, we probably walked out of there with 8 or 9 songs in a week.
Oh, dang. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And that's the thing about Eric, is even the songs that he leaves behind, they're stronger than a garlic milkshake.
Do you think we'll hear those songs someday?
Maybe so. So. Only time will tell.
The garlic milkshake. I've not heard that one before either. That is funny. So you mentioned how Heart of the Night was started. And I'll leave you on this. I would love to hear how Lone Wolf, and being that only the choir members can listen to it.
Sure.
How did Lone Wolf get started?
So that was an idea that I had. I actually got that idea watching Rambo, the movie Rambo. So at the beginning of there's just a beginning. The opening scene of Rambo is just him walking down the road by himself. He's walking into that Colorado town, and something about that scene kind of sparked me, and I just said something. I just wrote down Lone Wolf in my little idea pile, and I think the next morning I got together with Jeff, and I just said, man, is there anything to this, you know? And I had a little piece, you know, a piece of that first verse, and he and I kind of whittled on a chorus a little bit together. And it was another one of those situations where he said, hey man, I really think Eric might like this. Let's kind of put it under our hat and kind of wait a little bit. So, and it's just one of those we ended up sending to Eric. And, you know, I don't think we heard from him for a little while. And then all of a sudden one day out of the blue, we both got a text from him, and it said, here you go. And it was a work tape of him singing Lone Wolf. And I was like, well, I guess he liked it. You know?
Wait, so was that written in North Carolina, or was that written before?
It was written, I think it was
the idea was
before then, but then, you know, Eric kind of took it and did his thing.
Cool.
You know?
Yeah. All right. I lied. I got one more question for
Sure.
you.
Sure.
And this kind of ties it all together. You know, Springsteen, he says this in every one of his shows, music freezes a moment in time,
Sure
right?
does.
And I think that's the most powerful thing about the whole thing. So when you hear Lone Wolf, Where I Want to Be, Heart of the Night, that kind of your heart and soul of the
Sure.
album, what do you think of?
I just think, honestly, I don't know if I think of a place or a time. I just think about how thankful I am to be doing what I'm doing, you know, because there's not a lot of people that, you know, they get to live out their dream, you know, and I just thank the good Lord that he let me do it, you know? So, that's really what I think of, is just really how thankful I am, and just look forward to writing more. You know, that's really it.
Absolutely. Well, your music, I know, is going to strike a chord with all the church fans and music fans out there, and I know that it definitely has with me. So Ryan, I appreciate you taking some time this morning.
You got it. Thanks for having me.